London 1640. The air is thick with panic and the smell of gunpowder. King Charles I is broke, desperate, and fighting a war he cannot afford. He needs money. And he needs it now. So he does something unthinkable. He orders his soldiers to march into the Tower of London and seize the private gold of the city's wealthiest merchants. This wasn't a tax, it was a heist. In a single afternoon, the king stole the modern equivalent of millions of pounds from his own people. But here is the crazy part. This act of royal theft didn't just ruin a few merchants. It accidentally destroyed the old financial system and forced a new one to be born. The system that emerged from the chaos of that heist is the exact same one we use today. In this video, we are going to uncover the story of the Great Mint Heist of 1640. This is the moment when trust in the government collapsed so completely that money had to find a new home. We will dive deep into how a broke king, a group of angry goldsmiths, and a massive pile of stolen bullion invented the modern banknote. By the end of this video, you will understand why the cash in your pocket is actually just a receipt for a debt that can never really be paid back. To understand how this heist went down, we have to look at where money lived in the 17th century. Today, you trust a bank. In 1640, there were no banks. Not really. If you were a merchant in London, you had two choices for your gold. Option 1 was to keep it in your house. But London was full of thieves, fires, and wooden buildings. Keeping your life savings under the mattress was a terrible idea. Option 2 was the Tower of London. This was the Royal Mint. It was a fortress, protected by armed guards, stone walls, and the king's reputation. For years, merchants brought their foreign coins and gold bars here to be minted into English currency. It was considered the safest place in the kingdom. Crucially, the gold in the tower did not belong to the king. It belonged to the merchants. The king just owned the building. It was like a safety deposit box. You put your valuables in, and you assume the bank manager isn't going to drill into your box and take your jewelry. But in 1640, the bank manager was King Charles I, and Charles had a massive problem. He was fighting a war against the Scots, which was going very badly, and he was completely broke. He went to Parliament to ask for taxes. They said no. He went to the City of London to ask for a loan. They said no. He was a king with an army to pay and zero cash flow. He sat in his palace, staring at the financial reports, realizing he had nowhere left to turn. But he knew exactly where the money was. Here is where the story shifts, from a political drama to a crime thriller. It is July 1640. The merchants of London have about £130,000 sterling in silver and gold sitting in the Tower of London. In today's money, just the purchasing power alone would be tens of millions. But in an economy that small, it was a colossal amount of capital. Charles makes his move. He orders the seizure of every ounce of bullion in the tower. The order goes out. The gates are shut. The merchants are told that their gold is no longer their gold. It is now a loan to the crown. Imagine the panic. These merchants needed that silver to pay sailors, buy silk, and trade with the East Indies. Suddenly, their liquidity evaporated. It would be like Apple or Amazon having their bank accounts frozen overnight. The entire supply chain of London ground to a halt. The king promised to pay them back with interest. He offered 8%. But that didn't matter. The trust was gone. This is a critical lesson in finance that applies right now. Money is not just metal or paper. Money is trust. The moment Charles seized that gold, he didn't just steal wealth. He shattered the invisible agreement that allowed the economy to function. The merchants were furious. They eventually got most of the money back, but the damage was done. They realized a terrifying truth. The tower was not safe. The king was not a protector. He was a counterparty risk. So, when they finally got their gold back, they faced a dilemma. They couldn't leave it in the tower. They couldn't keep it at home. They needed a third option. This is the part almost nobody talks about. The merchants didn't start their own banks. They turned to the only other people in London who had secure vaults, the goldsmiths. Goldsmiths were craftsmen. They made jewelry and silverware. Because they worked with expensive materials, they had private vaults and heavy security. After the heist of 1640, the merchants started moving their capital out of the king's reach and into the private vaults of the goldsmiths. But here is where it gets interesting. When a merchant dropped off a bag of gold coins at a goldsmith, the goldsmith would give him a paper receipt. This receipt simply said, "I owe you 100 gold coins." At first, these were just claim tickets. If you wanted to buy a ship, you would go to the goldsmith, redeem your ticket, get the heavy gold, and carry it to the ship seller. But carrying heavy bags of gold across London was dangerous and annoying. So, merchants started doing something clever. Instead of collecting the gold, they just handed the paper receipt to the seller. The seller would look at the receipt and say, "Okay, I trust this goldsmith. This piece of paper is as good as gold." This was a revolution. The paper receipt became money. These were the ancestors of the banknotes in your wallet right now. They were called running cash notes, and this created a massive opportunity for the goldsmiths. They noticed something fascinating about human behavior. The goldsmiths realized that people rarely came to get their gold back. They were happy trading the paper receipts. The gold just sat there in the vault, gathering dust. So, the goldsmiths had a dangerous idea, they thought. If only 10% of people come to get their gold on any given day, why do we need to keep 100% of the gold in the vault? They started lending out the gold, or even better, they issued more paper receipts than they had gold to back them up. Let's say a goldsmith had 1,000 pounds of gold in his vault. He could issue paper notes worth 2,000 pounds. As long as everyone didn't run to the bank at the same time, nobody would know. He could charge interest on money that didn't technically exist. This was the birth of fractional reserve banking. It is the system we use today. Your bank does not have all your money in the vault. They lend it out to other people to buy houses and cars. They are betting that you won't all want your cash on the same day. And it all started because King Charles I scared the money out of the Tower of London. If Charles hadn't seized the mint, the merchants might have kept using the state system for decades longer. Private banking might have been delayed by a century. His greed accidentally privatized the money supply. Of course, this new system had its own risks. If everyone did lose confidence in a goldsmith, they would all rush to redeem their notes at once. This is called a bank run, and because the goldsmith didn't have all the gold, he would go bankrupt. This created a new cycle of booms and busts that we are still living with. But the power had shifted. The king no longer controlled the flow of money. The market did. King Charles I eventually lost his war. He also lost his head in 1649. But the financial revolution he triggered was unstoppable. By the time the Bank of England was officially founded in 1694, the concept of paper, money, and private banking was already established in the coffeehouses and goldsmith shops of London. So, what is the lesson here? First, it shows us that financial innovation often comes from a place of trauma. We don't invent new systems because we want to. We invent them because the old systems hurt us. The merchants invented private banking as a defense mechanism against a predatory government. Second, it reminds us that there is no such thing as a risk-free asset. The merchants thought the tower was safe. It wasn't. Today, we think government bonds are safe. Are they? We think our insured bank deposits are safe. Are they? History tells us that when a sovereign power gets desperate enough, the rules of the game can change overnight. The next time you tap your card or look at a banknote, remember the panic of July 1640. Remember that the system of credit, debt, and banking that runs our world was born from a heist. We like to think that finance is about math, but the story of London 1640 proves that finance is actually about trust. And trust is a fragile thing. It takes years to build, and one desperate decision to destroy. I want you to think about your own portfolio right now. You trust the institutions holding your wealth. But if a crisis truly hit, and the walls went up, do you actually own what you think you own? If this story made you rethink where you keep your money, make sure to subscribe. We are going to uncover more of the hidden history behind the economy in the next video. Here is the question I want you to answer in the comments. If the government decided to freeze assets tomorrow to save the economy, just like Charles I did, what would be the modern equivalent of moving your gold to the goldsmiths? Is it crypto? Is it gold bars in the garden? Or is there nowhere left to hide? Let me know what you think.